Welcome to the WRAL Daily Download. I'm Ashley Talley, and today's deep dive conversation is with Travis Fain, one of WRAL's NC Capitol reporters. Travis, earlier we talked about 2023 and all the crazy things that happened in NC politics. Now let's look ahead to 2024. I'm sure there will be no shenanigans this year at all.
Yeah, shenanigan free zone in 2024.
We ended our previous conversation talking about redistricting and its impact on voting districts here. That's really especially relevant. You can really see it in congressional districts. For example, Wiley Nickel, who was serving, I think, Southern Wake and Northern Johnston County, came out and told us last week he's not running again. How's that emblematic of other things we're seeing?
Yeah, all right. So right now, as we sit here recording this, our congressional delegation in North Carolina, 14 seats, 7 of them held by Democrats, 7 of them held by Republicans. After the 2024 elections, because of the way those districts were drawn by a Republican-controlled General Assembly, you will have either 11 Republicans and 3 Democrats or 10 Republicans and 4 Democrats, because there is one and only one competitive district in North Carolina where either a Republican can win or a Democrat can win. The others, it's a foregone conclusion because of the way they were drawn. And they were drawn, no one will dispute this, to strengthen Republican advantages because obviously control of the United States House of Representatives could very well be decided by not that many seats. And a swing of, 3 to 4 seats in North Carolina is a big deal.
It's a really big deal. When you put it in those terms, it's a really big deal. For example, taking District 13, the Wiley Nichols district that we were talking about, it used to be a pretty concentrated area. Now it covers like 4 or 5 counties.
Yeah, and it went from a district where a Democrat could obviously win. It tilted just a little bit Republican, I think, but I can't quite remember. But it was a close race. It was the only competitive district really last time. And now it's a district where Wiley Nickel isn't even running for re-election because a Democrat can't win. And I think there are 14 Republicans trying to get in there because it's an open seat. It's a Republican's going to win it, and once you win it, you're in Congress for a while, probably. I mean, unless you screw up real bad, voters tend to send incumbents back. So it's a good gig.
Or unless the maps get struck down, which doesn't.
It's possible, but probably unlikely. I mean, I don't know. There is a pending lawsuit. There is a lawsuit arguing that there was a racial gerrymander up in the northeast part of the state. Look, I'm not a lawyer, folks, but I've been following this for years. I've seen a lot of these lawsuits. This is not as strong as some of the other lawsuits in this area. So we'll see what the judges do with it, though. I don't know.
What's the only district that is competitive?
Oh, you would ask me that. I think it's that.
Just give me an area. You don't need the number.
I think it's one of those northeastern ones where former state Senator Don Davis, current U.S. House member Don Davis is running for re-election.
This is the G.K. Butterfield district, or previous G.K.
Used
Butterfield.
To be. It's
it was redrawn already.
This is not your grandfather's district or your dad's district or your mom's district. This is they have changed it a little bit, and it'll be interesting to see if Davis can hold on. He's a Democrat. He's kind of one of a few moderate Democrats out of Greenville, North Carolina.
What about in state legislative politics? What do you see happening in 2024?
Republican domination will continue. It kind of just depends on what form it takes. Republicans will easily win majorities in the House, State House, and State Senate. The only question is really, will they get supermajorities, allowing them to overturn vetoes? Just not to do too much 101 politics here, but a bill becomes a law by passing the General Assembly, and once it passes the General Assembly, the governor can sign it into law, or he or she can veto it and send it back to the General Assembly. And if they get a 3/5 majority, they can overturn that veto and make it law regardless of the governor. Now, we're also going to have a gubernatorial race here in 2024. So we could have a Republican governor after 2024, whereas Roy Cooper has been a Democrat, obviously. We could have a Democrat or a Republican there. So if the Republicans win the governor's office and the General Assembly, it doesn't really matter if they get that supermajority because a Republican governor is going to sign those priorities into law.
It wouldn't be that big of a change from right now, but it would be a huge change from 30 years ago when the state was largely Democratic?
Yeah, I mean, we went through a good century of Democratic control before the Republicans in around 2010 took control, and then Governor Pat McCrory was a Republican, but then he lost to Governor Roy Cooper, who's a Democrat. And we've had, for much of the last 8 years or so, what divided government, where the governor is a Democrat, the General Assembly is controlled by Republicans. Sometimes they've had those supermajorities and could overturn the governor, but sometimes they had to kind of work together with varying success rates. But one of the hallmarks of North Carolina in this period of time where we've had really strong economic growth, we are now twice in a row have been named the number one state to do business in. That was all under that divided concept of government where, Democrats and Republicans are butting heads and pushing and pulling, which is much different from when one party has control has control of both the executive and legislative branches.
It's sort of how government's supposed to work, right? We have checks and balances for a reason. When you think back to McCrory's term when the bathroom bill passed, they may have been very pro-business, but a lot of businesses withdrew from that sort of very conservative legislation.
Yeah, businesses, they like consistency and they don't like to be put on blast. They don't like to have to weigh in on divisive social issues. And sometimes the laws passed in states where they're very active force their hands on that. There is always a fine line that you don't want to cross with social issues. And one of the questions is, well, what will we do on abortion, for example, if we're under full Republican control here in North Carolina? Apple is a big progressive company that is going to bring thousands of jobs and billions of dollars to Research Triangle Park. They're kind of slower than we expected, but slowly building what amounts to another headquarters or a secondary location there. Can you imagine them working well with a fully run Republican government? Good, bad, or indifferent on that. There's gonna be frictions to an arrangement like that.
After the break, let's talk about the candidates who are up for gubernatorial and other legislative races. Thanks for being here today with me, Travis. We're talking about the 2024 politics and election cycle that North Carolina is getting ready to go through today on WRAL's Daily Download. The governor's race, obviously, is the biggest one in the state, single one in the state. We have multiple candidates. We have two really front runners, and they couldn't be more different.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So Josh Stein is the Democrat. He is the current Attorney General, and he is Democratic Governor Roy Cooper's choice. He is the Democratic heir apparent. Now, he's got a primary he's got to get through. A former state Supreme Court justice named Michael Morgan, who has an exceedingly strong resume, less strong poll numbers, less strong fundraising. Josh Stein is the man to beat, the Attorney General from the Democrats. On the Republican side, again, there's several candidates. Dale Folwell, state treasurer. He's had a strong career in Republican politics. Bill Graham, who is an attorney. He is self-funding a campaign, and he is pulling some establishment Republican. For example, Senator Tom Tillis, United States Senator Tom Tillis, is supporting Bill Graham. So he's kind of like the business candidate, if you will. But running like a freight train out of Greensboro is Lieutenant Governor Mark Robinson, who, 10, 20 years ago, I don't know that he goes anywhere in politics because some of the things that come out of his mouth, a lot of them are insulting to women, to LGBTQ folks, to anybody who is not a Christian at times. But that plays right now in the Republican Party, and he is extremely popular. And, we talked earlier about, can you imagine Apple working with this or that administration? I mean, Mark Robinson is nationally known for some of the things he said. And like you said, he and Josh Stein just couldn't be much more different from each other. So North Carolina voters will have a real choice, assuming they both get through the primary, which is what the polls say, but polls can be wrong. No one votes in the primaries until March. But North Carolinians will have a big choice to make in this governor's race.
Let's talk about how the presidential election could potentially impact our gubernatorial election. Trump has endorsed Mark Robinson. Again, the polls show that he is way up for the primary, so he's the likely candidate here. I know national politics is not your focus, but how do you see the Trump voter base and or the anti-Trump voter base impacting the election here?
I spoke to one Republican consultant who told me that if Donald Trump is at the top of the ticket, he's going to figure I think he said 3 to 5 point drop in every legislative race around the state, or in most of them. And, throw those numbers away for a moment. But what I'm saying here is, if Donald Trump is at the top of the ticket, potentially every Republican in every race below him gets fewer votes.
Really?
Right. Because, I realize that Donald Trump is extremely popular, and it seems like, nothing can stop this guy in the Republican Party. But there are plenty of people out there who don't want a president of the United States who's been indicted like 90 times at this point, and who is, I think, one of the most famous liars in the entire world. That's not really in dispute. That's not a subjective Travis opinion here. That's just kind of the way he is. And look, if Republicans want to elect that, hey, do it. But there are electability questions there. And that is why when I mentioned Bill Graham earlier as the establishment candidate for governor, there are a lot of these same concerns from many Republicans about Mark Robinson. He's going to win or likely to win the primary, but that's only half the battle. Like, what is this person electable in the general election? And of course, Trump people would say, hey, Trump won North Carolina twice.
Right.
He only won the presidency once. But in both those presidential elections, he won the state of North Carolina. So, he's doing something right by North Carolina voters.
When we think about sort of the establishment GOP in the state and the country, I think about how the Koch brothers recently endorsed Nikki Haley. And they have some North Carolina ties. Like, what do you think the GOP establishment, what's their take on Mark Robinson, and how are they showing that?
It's a mixed bag. The thing with popular Republicans, and I assume at different times popular Democrats, is people are afraid to speak against them, right? There are plenty of people who don't like what a Mark Robinson, or Donald Trump for that matter, stands for and says, but they like enough of their policies to back them. And Mark Robinson has the backing of Senate Republican leader Phil Berger. That's probably the most powerful Republican in the state of North Carolina right now. In a lot of ways, I've been using the phrase establishment Republican, and I hope people kind of know what I mean by that. That's maybe like people who are more concerned with fiscal policy than anything else. But Mark Robinson's an establishment Republican because he is the most popular Republican probably in the state of North Carolina. If you're going on the numbers, that's the establishment. That's not just the grassroots. That is the party.
I read in Axios this morning that they've been participating in a study with some swing voters, and out of the 11 or 12 people that they talked to, 3 could identify Stein and 1 could identify Robinson. I think we have to think about civic engagement levels, in general, and voter turnout.
Yeah, and that'll change. There'll be a lot of commercials that will just flood the zone. And people will make up their mind. I wish people would not make up their mind on commercials, but they do, and mailers too. And so those numbers will change radically. But it is a little sad, particularly given that I, for 10 hours a day, 5 days a week, try to inform the public about these things, and then I see polling like, hey, guess who reads you? Nobody.
That's not true. Many people do. They just were not part of this group. To close out, any surprises, any big things you think that might happen next year that maybe we're not, thinking about right now?
I promise you there will be quite a few of them. But I don't know. I if I had that strong a crystal ball, I'd be in the predictions game. I'd be making good money on it. I think you can expect, regardless of how most of the elections turn out, the issue of casinos to come back. We mentioned Phil Berger earlier. He's a Rockingham County state senator and also the head of the Republican caucus in the state Senate. He very badly wants to build a casino in Rockingham County. It would be something like a $500 million project, which is a big deal in any county, particularly a rural one like Rockingham County. There would be as many as 3 other casinos built as part of that deal. This is something he tried to do this past year here in 2023, didn't get over the finish line. I promise you it's coming back, and I'd say it's good money that it'll pass, that it'll happen. So be on the lookout for that, and also be on the lookout for a piggyback issue on that. If you're familiar with sweepstakes machines like video poker machines, part and parcel probably of a casino bill will be legalizing those. The state has tried to outlaw them and get rid of them, and has outlawed them several times with bills, but it's one thing to write that something's illegal, and it's another thing to get it out of every gas station in the state. So a lot of people just want to throw up their hands, legalize that, tax it, regulate it. You could see sweepstakes machines, or whatever they're going to call them. Usually video lottery terminals is the phrasing we use these days. Could see those legalized in 2024.
So more legalized gambling in North Carolina. It's a sure bet, huh?
It's a good bet. I won't call it a sure bet.
Travis, thank you so much for joining me today. Thank you all for listening to the Daily Download. Another great way to get WRAL news is the Morning Briefing newsletter. It's a daily email that's waiting in your inbox every morning with local news, events, and headlines to get you ready for the day ahead. Sign up at WRAL.com/newsletter.